Diddy is singing his own version of I Got Locked Up because they will not let him out. Prosecution is standing on business when it comes to Diddy getting out on bond. They are fearful that he will intimidate witnesses and obstruct justice. And if you recall last week, Don Richard, for everyone who said I was saying her name incorrectly.
Shut up.
My name is Don Richard.
Don made some claims in her lawsuit that she and her ex-bandmate Kalina Harper saw Diddy do the unthinkable to Cassie Ventura. But Kalina came out and she was like, I don't know, I've never witnessed any abuse, I don't know what you're talking about. And everybody was like, why would she do that? Now they're saying the day before Kalina actually made a statement, Diddy contacted her by phone 54 times. So now you wonder, why did Kalina make that statement? Now we seem to know. In court today, Diddy pled not guilty, just as we thought he would.
I didn't do this stuff.
Diddy had a hard time in jail last night because Diddy said he is ready to pay $50 million to make sure that he does not see the inside of that jail again and he gets out on bond. But Diddy is not giving the money in cash. He said, look, you can take my $48 million Miami mansion. Diddy said, hell, you can take my mama's house too. It ain't like she need it. Diddy was in there like,
I got some clothes, I got some jewelry, the rest I got tied up in investments. I ain't got nothing else.
Diddy also said that he will wear an ankle monitor and remain only in South Florida and the NYC area. Diddy is over there fighting for his life. Y'all killing him with this. Diddy is going through it because guess what? He is facing a minimum sentence if convicted of 15 years and a statutory maximum of life in prison. I told y'all the feds aren't nothing to play with. What we are going to do is get into this story and so much more. But before we do, please be sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss out on any news regarding this story and so much more. Now let's get back into it. Now, just like I said in my last video, Diddy is very clever. He will try to use this, I came to New York so y'all could pick me up, I wanted to surrender. He is going to use that to try to get out on bail. He ain't fooling nobody. Diddy's attorney sent a letter to the judge and was like, look, my client has been cooperating with you. We've been known that y'all were getting ready to indict him. He's moved to New York to make sure that things were easier. He even stated that he will come in and turn himself in. He's trying to sell his airplane. He's willing to sell his mama's house. Diddy, every one of his daughters, and his mother have all given up their passports. Diddy is not ready to see the inside of that jail again. He is like, let me out, and it's up to the judge to decide if he will do that. Well, breaking news, everybody. The judge said, The judge sent him right back to jail without bond. As promised, Diddy's indictment has been unsealed. Let's go ahead and read count 1. Racketeering conspiracy. We already know about the RICO charges. The grand jury charges. Overview. For decades, Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, Diddy, PD, and Love, the defendant, abused, threatened, and coerced women and others around him to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. To do so, Combs relied on the employees, resources, and influence of the multifaceted empire he led and controlled, creating a criminal enterprise whose members and associates engaged in and attempted to engage in, among other crimes, sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. Sean Combs and his multitude of aliases, also known as the defendant, operated his business headquartered at various times in Manhattan and Los Angeles under a variety of United States-based corporate entities, including Bad Boy Entertainment, Combs Enterprises, and Combs Global, collectively the Combs Business. Corporate entities in the Combs Business included, among other things, record labels, a recording studio, an apparel line, an alcoholic spirits business, a marketing agency, and a television network and media company. At all times relevant to this indictment, Sean Combs, the defendant, engaged in a persistent and pervasive pattern of abuse towards women and other individuals. This abuse was at times verbal, emotional, physical, and sexual. As part of his pattern of abuse, Combs manipulated women to participate in highly orchestrated performances of sexual activity with male commercial sex workers. At times, Combs and others, acting at his direction, made arrangements for women and commercial sex workers to fly to Combs' location. Combs ensured participation from the women by, among other things, obtaining and distributing narcotics to them, controlling their careers, leveraging his financial support and threatening to cut off the same, and using intimidation and violence. Physical abuse by Sean Combs, the defendant, was recurrent and widely known. On numerous occasions from at least in or about 2009 and continuing for years, Combs assaulted women by, among other things, striking, punching, dragging, throwing objects at, and kicking them. These assaults were at times witnessed by others and included one instance at a Los Angeles hotel in or about March 2016, which was captured on video and later publicly reported, where Combs kicked, dragged, and threw a vase at a woman as she was attempting to leave. When a member of the hotel security staff intervened, Combs attempted to bribe the staff member to ensure silence. Combs' violence was also not limited to these women. It extended to his employees, witnesses to his abuse, and others. Sean Combs, the defendant, used Combs' business, including certain employees, to carry out, facilitate, and cover up his abuse and commercial sex. Those employees including security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and high-ranking supervisors, and other close associates acted as Combs' intermediaries, and their conduct was facilitated and assisted by Combs' control of his Combs business. The Combs enterprise, from at least in or about 2008 through on or about the date of the filing of this indictment, Sean Combs, also known as the defendant, and others known and unknown, were members and associates of a criminal organization known as the Combs Enterprise or the Enterprise. Members and associates of the Combs Enterprise engaged in and attempted to engage in, among other activities, sex trafficking, forced labor, interstate transportation for purposes of prostitution, coercion, and enticement to engage in prostitution, narcotics offenses, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. The Combs Enterprise, including its leadership, its members, and its associates, constituted an enterprise as defined by Title 18, United States Code Section 1961, Part 4. That is a group of individuals associated in fact, although not a legal entity. The Combs Enterprise consisted of Sean Combs and all of his aliases, also known as the defendant. Entities within the Combs business included but not limited to Bad Boy Entertainment, Combs Enterprise, and Combs Global. Individuals employed by and associated with the Combs business, and others known and unknown. The Combs Enterprise constituted an ongoing organization whose members function as a continuing unit for a common purpose of achieving the objectives of the Combs Enterprise. The Combs Enterprise was engaged in and its activities affected interstate and foreign commerce. The Combs Enterprise operated in the Southern District of New York and elsewhere. At all times relevant to this indictment, Sean Combs and his aliases, also known as the defendant, was the leader of the Combs Enterprise. Sean Combs, the defendant, and others known and unknown participated in unlawful and other activities related to the conduct of the Combs Enterprise's affairs. These individuals included certain Combs business employees, such as members of Combs' security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and high-ranking supervisors, as well as other close associates of Combs. Purpose of Combs Enterprise. The purpose of Combs' enterprise included the following: operating a global business in the media, entertainment, and lifestyle industries, including, among other things, record labels, a recording studio, an apparel line, an alcoholic spirits business, a marketing agency, and a television network and media company. Preserving, protecting, promoting, and enhancing the power, reputation, and the brand of Sean Combs and his aliases, the defendant, as a musician, entrepreneur, and figure in the entertainment industry. Enriching members and associates of the enterprise, including its leader, Combs, and in particular those who demonstrated loyalty to Combs and willingness to conceal his crime. Preserving, protecting, promoting, and enhancing the power of the Combs Enterprise, including the power of its leader, Combs, through violence, use of firearms, threats of violence, coercion, and verbal, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. Fulfilling the personal desires of Combs, particularly those related to Combs' sexual gratification, including through the exploitation of women and the use of commercial sex workers. Enabling Combs and other members and associates of the Combs Enterprise to engage in unlawful acts of violence, including sexual violence, sex trafficking, forced labor, interstate transportation for purpose of prostitution, coercion, and enticement to engage in prostitution, narcotics distribution, and other crimes, and concealing the commission of such acts. Securing absolute loyalty for members of the Combs Enterprise, including through acts of violence and threats, and protecting the Combs Enterprise and its members and associates, including Combs, from detection and prosecution by law enforcement authorities through acts of intimidation, manipulation, bribery, and threats of retaliation against individuals who witness the crimes committed by members and associates of the enterprise. Means and methods of the enterprise. Among the means and methods by which Sean Combs, also known as the defendant, and other members and associates of the Combs Enterprise conducted and participated in the conduct of affairs of the Combs Enterprise included the following: Combs and other members and associates of the Combs Enterprise wielded the power and prestige of Combs' role at the Combs business to intimidate, threaten, and lure female victims into Combs' orbit, often under the pretense of a romantic relationship. Combs then used force, threat of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sex acts with male commercial sex workers that Combs referred to as, among other things, freak-offs. Freak-offs were elaborate and produced sex performances that Combs arranged, directed, masturbated during, and often electronically recorded. In arranging these freak-offs, Combs, with the assistance of members and associates of the Combs enterprise, transported and caused to be transported commercial sex workers across state lines and internationally. Freak-offs occurred regularly, sometimes lasting multiple days, and often involved multiple commercial sex workers. During freak-offs, Combs distributed a variety of controlled substances to victims, in part to keep the victims obedient and compliant. Sometimes unbeknownst to the victim, Combs kept videos he recorded of victims engaging in sex acts with commercial sex workers. After freak-offs, Combs and the victims typically received IV fluids to recover from the physical exertion and drug use. Members and associates of the Combs enterprise, including high-ranking supervisors, security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and other Combs business employees, facilitated the freak-offs by, among other things, booking hotel rooms for the freak-offs, stocking the hotel rooms in advance with the required freak-off supplies, including controlled substances, baby oil, lubricant, extra linen, and lighting. Cleaning the hotel rooms after the freak-offs to try to mitigate room damage, arranging for travel for victims, commercial sex workers, and Combs' to and from freak-offs, resupplying Combs with the requested supplies, delivering large sums of cash to Combs to pay the commercial sex workers, and scheduling the delivery of IV fluids. In or about March 2024, during searches of Combs' residence in Miami, Florida, and Los Angeles, California, law enforcement seized various freak-off supplies, including narcotics and more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant. Combs subjected victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse to cause the victims to engage in freak-offs. Combs maintained control over his victims through, among other things, physical violence, promises of career opportunities, granting and threatening to withhold financial support, and by other coercive means, including tracking their whereabouts, dictating the victim's appearance, monitoring their medical records, controlling their housing, and supplying them with controlled substances. During and separate from freak-offs, Combs, among other things, hit, kicked, threw objects at, and dragged victims at times by their hair. These assaults often resulted in injuries that took days or weeks to heal. Combs also threatened victims' career and livelihoods, including if they resisted participating in freak-offs. Victims believed they could not refuse Combs' demands without risking their financial or job security, or without repercussions in the form of physical or emotional abuse. Combs also used the sensitive, embarrassing, and incriminating recordings that he made during freak-offs as collateral to ensure the continued obedience and silence of the victims. Members and associates of the Combs enterprise, including Combs' security personnel, at times carried firearms. On more than one occasion, Combs himself carried or brandished firearms to intimidate and threaten others, including victims of the witnesses to the abuse. In or about March 2024, during searches of Combs' residences in Miami, Florida, and Los Angeles, California, law enforcement seized firearms and ammunition, including 3 AR-15s with defaced serial numbers, as well as a drum magazine. Members and associates of the Combs enterprise enabled Combs' control over victims by following his direction regarding financial payments to victims, advancing or suppressing the victims' career opportunities, and acquiring their controlled substances Combs used to keep the victims compliant. Members and associates of the Combs enterprise at times witnessed Combs' violence towards the victims or the victims' injuries caused by Combs without intervening. Instead, members and associates of the Combs enterprise helped conceal the violence and abuse by, among other things, assisting Combs in monitoring and preventing victims from leaving locations such as hotels or Combs' residences. These occasions included instances in which a victim was required to remain in hiding, sometimes for several days at a time, to recover from injuries Combs inflicted without being publicly observed. Members and associates of the Combs enterprise also assisted Combs in locating and contacting victims who attempted to flee his abuse. When employees, witnesses to his abuse, or others threatened Combs' authority or reputation, Combs and members and associates of the enterprise engaged in acts of violence, threats of financial and reputational harm, and verbal abuse. These acts of violence including kidnapping and arson. In addition, on multiple occasions, Combs threw both objects and people, as well as hit, dragged, choked, and shoved others. When Combs' authority or reputation was threatened by the possibility of negative publicity or legal or law enforcement action against him, including in or about late 2023, following public allegations of Combs' crimes, Combs and members and associates of the enterprise pressured witnesses and victims, including through through attempted bribery, to stay silent and not to report what they experienced or knew to law enforcement. On phone calls, Combs and other members and associates of the enterprise, among other things, provided these victims and witnesses with a false narrative of events in an effort to conceal Combs' crimes. Combs caused these calls to be recorded on at least 2 occasions. The racketeering conspiracy, from at least in or about 2008 through on or about the date of the filing of this indictment in the Southern District of New York and elsewhere. Sean Combs, also known as the defendant, and others known and unknown, being persons employed by and associated with the Combs enterprise, described in paragraphs 6 through 12 of this indictment, an enterprise engaged in and the activities of which affected interstate and foreign commerce, knowingly combined, conspired, confederated, and agreed together and with each other to violate the racketeering laws of the United States, to wit, Title 18 United States Code Section 1962C, that is, to conduct and participate directly and indirectly in the conduct of the affairs of the Combs enterprise through a pattern of racketeering activity, as that term is defined in the Title 18 United States Code Section 1961, Part 1 and 1961 Part 5, consisting of multiple acts involving kidnapping, chargeable under the following provisions of the state law: California Penal Code 207, kidnapping; California Penal Code 21A, 664, attempt; California Penal Code 31, aiding and abetting; and California Penal Code 182, conspiracy. Multiple acts involving arson, chargeable under the following provisions of state law: California Penal Code 451, which is arson; California Penal Code 21A, 664, attempt; California Penal Code 31, aiding and abetting; and California Penal Code 182, conspiracy. Multiple acts involving bribery, chargeable under the following provisions of state law: California Penal Code 137A, bribery of a witness; California Penal Code 21A, 664, attempt; California Penal Code 31, aiding and abetting; and California Penal Code 182, conspiracy. Multiple acts involving Title 18 United States Code Section 1512, relating to tampering with a witness, victim, or an informant. Multiple acts indictable under Title 18 United States Code Section 1589 and 2 related to forced labor. Multiple acts indictable under Title 18 United States Code Section 1591 and 2 related to sex trafficking. Multiple acts indictable under Title 18 United States Code Section 2421, 2422, and 2 related to transporting an inducement to travel for purposes of prostitution and illegal sexual activities, and multiple offenses involving of possession with intent to distribute or distribution of narcotics and controlled substances, and a list of other drugs which we are not going to name. It was part of the conspiracy that Sean Combs, aka the defendant, agreed that a conspirator would commit at least 2 acts of racketeering activity in the conduct of the affairs of the Combs enterprise. Notice of special sentencing factor: from at least in or about 2009 up to and including in or about 2018 in the Southern District of New York and elsewhere, as part of the agreement to conduct and participate in the conduct of the affairs of the Combs enterprise through a pattern of racketeering activity. Sean Combs, also known as the defendant, agreed to and in affecting interstate and foreign commerce, knowingly recruit, entice, harbor, transport, provide, obtain, advertise, maintain, patronize, and solicit by any means a person knowing and in reckless disregard of the fact that means of force, threats of force, fraud, and coercion as described in Title 18 United States Code Section 1591 E2, and any combination of such means would be used to cause the person to engage in a commercial sex act in violation of Title 18 United States Code Section 1591 A1 and B1. Count 2, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. Victim 1. The grand jury further charges from at least on or about 2009 up to and including in or about 2018 in the Southern District of New York and elsewhere. Sean Combs, also known as the defendant, in and affecting interstate and foreign commerce, knowingly recruited, enticed, harbored, transported, provided, obtained, advertised, maintained, patronized, and solicited by any means a person knowing and in reckless disregard of the fact that the means of force, threats, or force, fraud, or coercion as described in Title 18 United States Code Section 1591 E2, and any combination of such means would be used to cause the person to engage in a commercial sex act and attempted, aided, and abetted, willfully cause the same, to wit, Combs recruited, enticed, harbored, transported, and maintained a person, victim 1, and obtained, aided, and abetted, and willfully caused victim 1 to engage in commercial sex acts, knowing and in reckless disregard of the fact that victim 1 was engaged in commercial sex acts as a result of force, fraud, and coercion. Count 3, transportation to engage in prostitution. The grand jury further charges from at least in or about 2009 up to and including in or about 2024 in the Southern District of New York and elsewhere. Sean Combs, also known as the defendant, defendant knowingly transported an individual in interstate and foreign commerce with intent that the individual engage in prostitution, and attempted, aided, and abetted, and willfully caused the same. To wit, Mr. Combs transported, aided, and abetted, and willfully caused the transportation of female victims and commercial sex workers in interstate and foreign commerce on multiple occasions with the intent that they engage in prostitution. And what the next part is a forfeiture allegation. So what they're saying is that with count 1, 2, and 3 of this indictment, if Diddy has received any funds, if he's bought any properties, any cars, any planes, was purchased with the money from these illegal activities, he is to forfeit everything immediately because of the way he's received the funds illegally. And the next part is a substitute asset provision. So what they're pretty much saying is if Diddy tries to take funds and hides them overseas, if he tries to sell his properties to anyone else, the United States has the authority to seek forfeiture of any other property of the defendant up to the value of the above forfeitable property. That was a lot. I knew Diddy was doing exactly what I thought he would do. Start making phone calls, start threatening people. The feds waited for a time like this. They wanted to scare him up and see what he was going to do afterwards. I honestly expected to read a little bit more in this. However, they typically leave the real tea inside of the complaint, not the indictment. So we will see once the complaint comes out. You know, we will break that completely down. What I need to do is hear from you. What do you think about this baby oil saga from Mr. Can't Stop, Won't Stop?
If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video.